on what matters. Thank you for working hard to champion important causes, to ultimately shine a light on issues that need attention and help us to promote the value of diversity and inclusion. We continue to need your voice to challenge and support issues that impact African Americans. Again, we salute your efforts, and your work is truly appreciated. As I think about the theme of the conference, which is Defeat, Hate, Vote, this is very key. It's amazing how the simple act of voting can ignite positive change. Now, more than ever before, we need to use our voting power to activate our resources to continue to make a difference across all industries, all communities, and realistically, all around the globe. The work of the NAACP and Clarence Mitchell has helped to create a better America, a better world. And it's helped to create opportunities, equality, and hope among communities, families, and people of all backgrounds. Marriott has a long history of being a welcoming and inclusive company, and one that is proud of its diverse workforce and is consistently recognized for providing not just its employees, but its guests, suppliers, hotel owners with a true world of opportunity to explore, grow, and succeed. For many of you, you may know that in 1989, Marriott was the first company in the travel industry to establish a formal diversity and inclusion program and the first to introduce a formal supplier diversity program in 1997. We have proven and internationally have recognized programs to develop our employees, engage diverse suppliers, owners, and franchisees to partner with us. Worldwide, over the past 13 years, Marriott has spent more than $13 billion with diverse suppliers. We also partner with diverse owners to build our hotels around the world. Marriott has a plan to have 1,500 hotels owned by diverse owners by 2020. The good news is that we are well on our way to achieving that goal, having, as of the end of 2017, more than 1,200 of our hotels that are owned by women and diverse businesses and partners. We welcome you to ultimately become one of those partners twice a year at our corporate headquarters in Bethesda, Maryland. We host a diversity ownership summit. The fall summit will be in October of 2018. So please feel free to go to our website. I'm focused on development, and you can find out more. I'll end by saying, as our founder, J.W. Marriott Sr., often says, success is never final. That philosophy continues to thrive in our culture, and we hold true to it. Even as the company expands and grows, it is truly about putting people first. We firmly believe that everyone who enters our hotels should feel a sense of belonging, feel valued, and respected. Whether you are an employee, a supplier, a hotel owner, or a guest. We appreciate you and thank you for your support of the Marriott brands. We look forward to welcoming you again and thank you for the important work that you do, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you, Mariel, for your remarks, and thank you for Marriott's continuing support of the NAACP and the Clarence Mitchell Luncheon. Next, we will hear from another of our sponsors, Marie Scylla Dixon, Vice President of Government and External Affairs, T-Mobile Corporation in Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay. First, I would like to congratulate President Johnson, Brad, and Hillary, and the NAACP family on their 109th annual convention. Second, I would like to acknowledge and thank you, Governor Patrick, for your continued service and leadership at this much-needed time in our country. I also would like to recognize Congressman Bobby Scott, who has been a true champion for the disenfranchised in Congress, and I know he's here. I am honored to be here today representing T-Mobile, the Un-carrier, for this luncheon. This is our second year in a row sponsoring this luncheon. And I'm also proud that we're here today to celebrate the life and the legacy of the great Clarence Mitchell Jr., who was a warrior for this organization. As a black woman in corporate America and a working mother of a young child, I am no stranger to adversity, but I am always reminded and motivated that I would not be here today as a vice president of a major Fortune 500 company if it were not for the courageous trailblazers such as Clarence Mitchell Jr. and Juanita Jackson Mitchell, and so many others who fought tirelessly and sacrificed so much to ensure that future generations would have limitless opportunities and would not have to fight these battles. Unfortunately, history has a way of repeating itself. However, now is not the time to give up. Now is the time to stand strong and channel the spirit and the legacy of these trailblazers to defeat hate. Just recently, I was watching the news, and there was a story about the children in the detention centers. And so many times as a young parent, a parent of a young child, you don't let them watch the news all the time. But my 7-year-old was right by me, and she caught the story, and she's very inquisitive, and she asks a lot of questions all the time. And Layla, that's my daughter's name, she said, "Mommy, how can they do that?" I had to stop what I was doing, and I had to explain what was going on and why this was even happening and being allowed in our country. And it was a tough conversation to have, with a 7-year-old. My daughter kept countering, saying that this is not right. I also had to remind her that her own mother, me, immigrated to this country and was afforded many opportunities to succeed in spite of adversity. So today I stand with you proud to tell you, for children like my daughter, we must support the work of this great organization for years to come, especially for this critical period in our lives. On behalf of T-Mobile, thank you, NAACP, for partnering with us and for being a voice for what is right and good. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. For 16 years running, the Kellogg Corporation has funded a summer law fellow program at the NAACP headquarters. Each year we hire 5 to 6 very talented law students to come to Baltimore to get an idea of what it is to be a civil rights lawyer. Next, hopefully, if it's teed up, we have a video from Gary Pilnick, Vice Chairman for Corporate Development and Chief Legal Officer at the Kellogg Corporation in Battle Creek, Michigan.
I'm Gary Pilnick, Vice Chairman and General Counsel of the Kellogg Company, and the Kellogg Company is very excited to play a part in the 109th NAACP Annual Convention and the 34th Annual Continuing Legal Education Seminar. We've been excited to be part of and committed to the NAACP Law Fellows Program for the past 16 years. We have gained so much as a company being part of this organization, and we're hoping that they get rewarded as well for being connected to the Kellogg Company. We have over the years found out how talented the people are who are involved with this program year after year. We're impressed with the quality of the individuals and the differences they want to make in their communities. We're hoping when they come to visit us in Battle Creek every year that maybe they get inspired by us, but we know one thing: we're certainly inspired by them. We'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and congratulate the 2018 class of NAACP Law Fellows: Anna Catherine Barnes, Erin Monique Gurowitz, Tanisha Mitchell, Kenesha Ann Rayford, Brianna Rogier, and Nye Winslow. We'd like to wish the fellows much success in their law school and in their future careers as leaders. We're expecting a lot from you, and we know it's going to come. Thanks so much.
I don't think, did the law fellows stand as their names were being called? Did they? Okay, all right. I was engaged otherwise. I apologize. Okay. Next, I would like to invite to the stage someone you all know who gave a rousing speech and charge to the NAACP just last night, telling us what we need to do and why we need to do it. Please join me in welcoming to the stage the Chairman of the Board of Directors of the NAACP, Mr. Leon Russell.
Thank you, Brad. Now, I have a lot to say, but I have a very short time to say it, so you're in luck. First, I have a dream. I have a dream that the NAACP Legal Department once again has a litigation division with the sole purpose of filing outside lawsuits on behalf of civil rights issues in this country. I need your help to fulfill my dream. I really need your help. That means that we've got to come up with a way to fund that litigation division. And so all of you out there who are friends of the legal department, all of you branch folks who have such great expectations for the legal department, need to figure out how we roll some money into the budget to fund that litigation division. Y'all help me do that. Help me fulfill a dream. Now, secondly, I want to congratulate our very small but very hard-working legal department for doing the things it has done over the past year. DACA, TPS, It goes on, the census, redistricting, all of those things are major issues. And there are so many of those kinds of issues out there that we need to address. We can only do that, branches, if y'all stop fighting with each other and allow the legal team some time to work on the legal issues that really make a difference rather than resolving your complaints. Help me with that one. Now that's that side of the ledger. Want to talk about your speaker for a couple of seconds. It's important for us in AACP. I talked a great deal about public policy makers last evening. We know, and I'm not introducing him, but we know the speaker this afternoon to be a public policy maker who really does care. Cares about people, communities. He cares about the Constitution. He proved that. He proved that when he was at the Justice Department, and he certainly demonstrated it as governor of the state of Massachusetts. So when you look out and you wonder what kind of person ought to be in public office, I suggest that you might look at Deval Patrick as the kind of person that you ought to be considering, whether it be for the sheriff, whether it be for a prosecutor, whether it be for a mayor, whether it be for a governor or a senator, whether it be for a president of the United States. I'm just saying, when you look out and you're trying to ascertain what qualities are needed, you ought to use the successful models that exist in the environment. That's all I'm saying. Finally, I want to congratulate our legal committee for all of the hard work they do. I want to thank Bradbury for putting up with me, and that means answering the phone every time I call, and I do that. Yeah, I use a phone. I'm old school because I like to explain verbally what it is that I need, right? That's right. Okay, so we're good. And I want to thank all of you for supporting our legal department. Thanks.
All right. I neglected to acknowledge the representative of the Kellogg Corporation who was here with us. I want to acknowledge Nicole M. Perry, senior attorney with the Kellogg Corporation, who has traveled here today to be with us and to be with us with our legal fellows. And so why don't you wave your hand around and stand up and let everybody know where you are. Thank you. Okay. I think we'll do one more. Sponsor greeting. Although I do not have the name of the individual. But we were also supported by the ACLU of Texas. And so we want to invite the representative from the ACLU of Texas, Ms. Sharon Watkins-Jones.
Good afternoon. ACLU of Texas is a proud sponsor of the Clarence Mitchell Luncheon, and it is so fitting as Mr. Mitchell fought so hard for the Voting Rights Act. When Texas extended the Voting Rights Act, as they were loath to do in the 70s, a woman named Ruby Flowers was represented by ACLU of Texas because Texas decided to purge 5 million voters from the rolls and have them re-register to vote. ACLU of Texas proudly defended Ms. Flowers and derailed that effort. And so it is very fitting that we are here today as a sponsor. Recently, we've joined a national ACU initiative called the Smart Justice Campaign, which has two goals: to reduce mass incarceration in the United States by 50% and to address racial disparities and discrimination in the criminal justice system. Thank you. In Texas, we subscribe to these goals for our fellow Texans, and we've recently selected the Dallas County District Attorney's race to pilot these efforts. The district attorney is the most powerful elected official in our justice system that you may never know. They have tremendous impact on people's lives, their families, and our communities. The district attorney decides whether someone will be charged with a crime, which crimes to prosecute, and who gets a second chance through diversion or treatment programs. Here's why this matters to us in Texas. The federal prison population has increased by almost 790% since 1980. We have 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. More than 1 in 100 adults in this country were behind bars in 2008. 1 in 35 adults is under correctional supervision, either prison, jail, probation, or parole. Texas has an annual corrections budget of about $3 billion, money that could be better spent on education and other programs to improve our communities. A black person in Texas is between 4 and 34 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than a white person, despite approximately equal rates of use. At least 3,278 people were serving life sentences without parole for drug, property, and nonviolent crimes in 2012. The ACLU of Texas is seeking to change that whole conversation around smart justice, and we need your help. If your NAACP chapter is not working with ACLU of Texas or ACLU in your state, please come and see me and let's change that today. I want to also acknowledge a member of our ACLU of Texas board, Mr. Gary Bledsoe, and I thank you so much for allowing us to support you today.
Thanks so much for your support and for your remarks. This time I'd like to do some acknowledgments. We have at the NAACP the hardest working board of directors in show business. And I just want to, I want our board members, if you would, and if you're able, to either stand up or wave your hands and let yourselves be appreciated. The members of the NAACP Board of Directors, please stand. Thank you very much. We also have a fundraising arm called the NAACP Foundation. Its name was changed in the past year. It used to be called the NAACP Special Contribution Fund. Now it is the NAACP Foundation, whose members work tirelessly to raise the funds necessary to support NAACP programs. Would members of the NAACP Foundation please stand and be recognized? All right. Within the board of directors, there's a group of lawyers called the Legal Committee, which is headed by Judge Fred Banks, who's here on the dais, and also by Gary Bledsoe, who's here on the dais. So we got good legal committee representation here on the dais. Would other members of the NAACP, the legal committee of the NAACP Board of Directors, please stand and be recognized? Oh, sorry about that. We have representatives from the United States Congress with us today. I believe it was already mentioned, the Congressman Bobby Scott. from the 3rd District of Virginia is in the room, as he always is. He's a mainstay at these functions. Also, Congressman Sheila Jackson Lee, I understand, is in the room. Let's give her a round of applause. Now, we heard from the chairman, but I've just been told that the vice chairman, the very able vice chair of our board of directors, is always here. Karen, would you please stand up and take a bow? All right. Mary, would you like to do some acknowledgments? Okay. All right. Let's see what's next. I'm well aware that you didn't come here to hear me talk. So I'm going to just say a little bit more and get out of the way here. Our keynote speaker rose from humble beginnings on the south side of Chicago to a distinguished legal and public service career, which included his election as the first African American governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and only the second African American elected as governor of a state since Reconstruction. And he was reelected, so I guess he's the second and the third African American to be elected. Deval Patrick's brilliance was recognized at an early age, as he was awarded a scholarship to attend the prestigious Milton Academy by the organization A Better Chance. From there, he blazed a trail to Harvard College and then to Harvard Law School, where he was elected president of the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau, which provides legal services to low-income residents in the Boston area. Following law school, Governor Patrick clerked for the Honorable Stephen Reinhardt, the liberal lion on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. He thereafter joined the staff of the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, where he pursued his passion for civil rights advocacy. During his time with LDF, Governor Patrick worked on a criminal case involving 3 voting rights advocates who were charged with voting fraud for helping poor black Alabamans submit absentee ballots. The U.S. attorney in that case was none other than Jefferson Beauregard Sessions. And the trial of the case, I believe, resulted in an acquittal. Is that right? Okay. That takes some lawyering. Governor Patrick honed his expertise in voting rights law during his time at LDF, bringing lawsuits against states that violated the Voting Rights Act. He gained the attention of then-Governor Bill Clinton of Arkansas because Arkansas was engaging in such practices. Governor Clinton apparently didn't mind much, however, because he later tapped Governor Patrick to leave his prestigious and lucrative partnership in a Boston law firm to join the Clinton administration as Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, the Department of Justice. That's where I met Governor Patrick. He was a 30-something presidential appointee running a major component of one of the largest federal government agencies. And I was a 20-something line attorney way down on the totem pole. Even so, Governor Patrick was unfailingly gracious in his interactions with me, as he was with all DOJ staff, generous with his time, and patient. He was also wise far beyond his years and utterly brilliant. Those qualities marked his very successful tenure with the Department of Justice, where, among other notable accomplishments, he defended the use of race-based affirmative action in appropriate circumstances, vigorously investigated hate crimes, including the burning of several churches in the South, and blocked the use of racially discriminatory voting practices in jurisdictions then requiring pre-clearance under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. You all know we don't have that anymore. Following a stint in the private sector and as general counsel of 2 major companies, Governor Patrick returned to Massachusetts in the early 2000s. His thirst for public service not yet quenched, he ran for governor, and in 2006 was elected as the first African-American governor of the Commonwealth, and then he was re-elected 4 years later. Among his accomplishments as governor of Massachusetts are the following. He signed into law an election modernization bill which enacted online voter registration, early voting, pre-registration of 16-year-olds, post-election audits of voting equipment, and reforms to treatment of inactive voters. That's not all. He oversaw the expansion of affordable health care to more than 98% of the state's residents, and he launched initiatives to stimulate clean energy and biotechnology. He funded public education at the highest levels in the history of the Commonwealth, achieved nation-leading student performance, and earned Massachusetts the top spot in the national Race to the Top competition. He signed an extensive package of gun control measures, allowing police chiefs to petition courts to block firearm sales to individuals who should not own them, toughening penalties for gun-based crimes, creating an online portal for background checks in private gun sales, carving out a firearms trafficking unit within the state's police department, and requiring that Massachusetts join the National Instant Background Check System. He also achieved major reforms of the state's pension systems, ethics laws, education rules, and transportation bureaucracy. Currently, Governor Patrick works with Bain Capital as a managing director. In keeping with his public spiritedness, he focuses on socially responsible investments producing market rates of return. He is a husband of over 30 years to his wife, Diane, father to 2 daughters, and now I am told a proud grandfather. That's hard to believe looking at you. NAACP, it gives me great pride and pleasure to present to you the Honorable Deval L. Patrick.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Brad, thank you for that generous introduction. You could have left out the part about the delta between our ages. Otherwise, I hope to become the man you described. Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, members of the board, brothers and sisters, I'm glad to be with you this afternoon. And I thank you all for being here. I want to join in honoring the awardees, whom we will hear more about in a moment, President Simulton, President Bowling Williams, and my old friend Joe Sellers. Thank you for the example that you set for all of us. And may I add my thanks to the sponsors for their generosity. The members of Congress and other elected officials who are here today deserve special acknowledgement and special thanks for your service. It's never easy to serve. It seems especially difficult to do so today in Washington, D.C. From a distance, it looks pretty bad. From a distance, it looks to be mired in permanent gridlock, poisoned rhetoric, and toxic relationships. From a distance, it looks like all those unwritten rules about decorum and restraint, respect and duty, on which it turns out our democracy depends, have been just tossed aside. Those present today are important exceptions. So I want to invite everyone to join me in expressing gratitude to them and to all elected officials who are doing their part to respect our democracy. Now, the NAACP is a nonpartisan organization. I know that. You don't have to be partisan to support its agenda of social and economic justice, just a patriot. You don't have to be a partisan to believe in equality and opportunity for all, just a patriot. Among the NAACP's most patriotic achievements were the long, hard fights to win the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, and so many other foundational legislative victories. And it was my honor to work alongside the NAACP to defend those gains when I led the Civil Rights Division at the Justice Department. For the career men and women of the division, just like for the professionals and the advocates and grassroots organizers of the NAACP over the years, that was not and is not partisan work. That was and remains patriotic work. So for the record, I'm clear that this is a nonpartisan organization that does nonpartisan work. You should also know for the record that I am a Democrat. Wait a minute. I'm not the sort of Democrat who thinks you have to hate Republicans to be a good Democrat, or that any one party has a corner on all the best ideas. Now, having said that, let's face some nonpartisan facts. Republicans today occupy every office of federal power. They run the White House, every executive office, and both houses of Congress, and still can't get much done that actually helps ordinary people. Instead of lowering costs and improving access, Republicans tried and tried again to take health care away from tens of millions of Americans. And when that failed, they found other ways to make matters worse for people by destabilizing insurance markets and driving up costs for working people and making it harder for people with pre-existing conditions to get any insurance, many of the features that made the Affordable Care Act worth fighting for. Republicans passed a tax bill that overwhelmingly favors people who already make or have a lot of money. And while I may be one of the few Democrats who will say out loud that we needed more competitive business rates, it makes no sense to cut the rates and keep all the loopholes. Besides, having more competitive business rates doesn't matter much when the administration in the same instant is picking trade fights with our best global partners and thumbing its nose at rules that can or should make the marketplace more fair. Republicans can't even get together on immigration reform. It's not because there isn't broad, even bipartisan support to protect the dreamers, secure the border, and even provide a path to citizenship for the millions of hardworking, undocumented people who are here and contributing today to making our country even better. Comprehensive reform is stuck because right-wing Republicans and the president himself cannot resist the temptation to use fear and racism to inflame voters and drive turnout. Facts may not matter to everyone, but they still matter to democracy. And however inconvenient or uncomfortable it may be, it's a nonpartisan fact that Republicans have ballooned the federal deficit, made military service harder and less accessible to people ready, willing, and able to serve, used innocent children as pawns to pressure vulnerable adults to stay out of the country and racism to drive policy decisions, alienated our neighbors and cozied up to dictators and despots, done all of this not by accident but on purpose, and topped it off with an unapologetic display of corruption and contempt for those very unwritten rules on which democracy depends. But you know all that. Now here's the part that may surprise you. We made this. Yes, Republicans are making a righteous mess of their moment in absolute unchecked power. But we made this. When I say we, I'm not talking about any one group or political party. I'm not talking about just the voters who stayed home in 2016. I'm talking about all the voters who stay home in every election, from either party or no party, who give the United States the dubious distinction of having the lowest level of voter participation of any industrialized democracy. Because the truth is that in a democracy, harsh as it sounds, we get the government we deserve. And a whole lot of us have gotten too busy or too distracted or overwhelmed or dismayed and just checked out. Meanwhile, this administration, whether it's on taxes or climate change or civil rights or health care or the justice system, is driving an agenda decades in the making to deliver unpopular outcomes, probably unachievable if more of us were paying attention. Outcomes made possible because of incremental steps taken in parallel to degrade our democracy. That's why all the sort of pearl clutching by so-called establishment Republicans rings a little hollow for me, because at the end of the day, the president just says out loud what they've been saying in code for years. And the rest of us, we the people, have stood by and let it happen by holding no one to account. Because you see, it's officials we elect, working within a system of democratic politics, who choose which problems become issues deserving of common solutions. And just give me a minute to explain what I mean. I grew up, as Brad said, on the south side of Chicago, some of that time on welfare. I lived with my mother and my sister in our grandparents' two-bedroom apartment with various other relatives who came and went. My mother and sister and I shared one of those two bedrooms and a set of bunk beds, so you'd rotate top bunk, bottom bunk, floor every third night on the floor. I went to big, broken, overcrowded, under-resourced, sometimes violent public schools. I can't remember a time when I didn't love to read. But I don't remember owning a book of my very own until I was 14 years old, and I got that break on a scholarship to go to a boarding school outside of Boston. For me, that was like landing on a different planet. Now, opioid addiction was a problem in my old neighborhood. It was a problem in my own home. But it didn't become an issue until it got to the suburbs. new technology that displaced workers and economic change that left workers and their families behind was a problem in my neighborhood. But it didn't become an issue until it reached white working people. A criminal justice system that made it impossible for people to get back into productive life after doing their time was a problem for my neighbors. But it didn't become an issue until mass incarceration began to crowd out other priorities in state budgets. Problems are things we observe from a safe distance, things that affect other people in other places. Issues are things deemed to affect the common good and to deserve common solutions. More often than not, it's our elected leaders who determine when problems become issues to be solved. In a democracy, we choose the government we get. And we, as citizens, have been lax about holding our elected officials to account for which problems become issues and when. And I'm convinced African Americans and other racial and ethnic minorities are by no means the only Americans who wonder just what it takes for problems in our communities to become issues our government is willing and ready to address. More than 60 years after Brown versus Board of Education, Americans are still waiting to hold our elected officials to account for schools that fail not just black children, but poor children of every race and color, and children with special needs, and children who speak English as a second language. Americans of every type and kind are still waiting to hold our elected officials to account for an economy that favors the well-connected instead of one that gives everyone a chance to flourish, for a higher education system that chains ambition to student debt instead of one that unlocks a world of opportunity, for a criminal justice system that has made us more careless and more cruel, not more safe or more just, for the right as adults to make the most intimate decisions in our own lives. Surely, it has to be true that American coal miners in Appalachia, American ranchers in the West, American factory workers in declining industries, American workers in all those towns and cities that aren't already magnets for venture capital and tech workers and the hip new startup economy have been wondering for a long time, when the problems of economic displacement they face and the anxiety about the future they feel, when the sense that America has finished with them and moved on, will become issues worthy of national attention and solutions. The Great Recession may be over technically, but social and economic anxiety remains. And that's not limited, I believe, to any race or class or region. The poor have been in terrible shape for a long time. But the Great Recession put many, many others within a paycheck of being poor and left them deeply shaken by it. Unemployment is low today, and that's good. But today's workplace is still volatile. Industry changes rapidly, and with it, so does the need for new skills. And folks know that a job is not the same thing as a career. Many parents are in quiet anguish because the future they envision for themselves, let alone for their kids, is harder to reach. Now, as a nation, we've been here before. In the 1830s, during Reconstruction, at the dawn of the Industrial Age, after the Wall Street crash in 1929, to name just a few such moments. And we ought to know from that history that social and economic anxiety is combustible. We can use it to fuel fear and division, or we can use it to fuel our future. In many ways, both pathways are familiar to us in America, but only one is patriotic. Only one. And that's important to see. Right? Unspeakable violence and immeasurable generosity. The lowest meanness and transformative grace. Narrow parochialism and big-hearted acceptance. All of this live side by side in America. All of it is, in some sense, American. Only the best of it is patriotic. But this is the point our current leaders seem over and over again to miss. Instead of uniting us to solve the big, hard challenges that face us all, instead of using the unique opportunity of one-party rule to bring us together, Republican leaders consistently choose division. Today's Republican leaders choose not to fix, but to inflame. Not to fix our immigration system, but to inflame us about a vicious, but according to law enforcement, fundamentally local gang. Not to fix the widening inequality and opportunity divide, but to inflame us about affirmative action. Not to fix an economy that needlessly leaves too many behind, but to start a feud with our best trading partners and allies. Be clear, everybody, these are political choices about power over progress, slander over solutions. We need to do more than reclaim some skewed notion of American greatness. We need to reclaim American patriotism. I don't know when patriotism in our country got reduced to lapel pins and flyovers and questions about whether pro football players should or should not take a knee. Surely it's got to be more than that. I think patriotism has something to do with really understanding what makes this nation great. America is not great because of its wealth, its military might, or even its remarkable national achievements. Extraordinary as all of that is. Other nations throughout history have had vast wealth and natural resources, extraordinary armies and navies, legendary national narratives, and those nations have come and gone with the march of time. America is great because, unlike any other nation in human history, we organized ourselves not by geography or race or religion or language or even a common culture, but instead around a handful of civic ideals. And we have defined those ideals over time and through struggle as freedom, equality, opportunity, and fair play. On the promise of these ideals, generations of Americans, through toil, sweat, and sacrifice, have delivered extraordinary achievements, to be sure, but it is because of those ideals that we have been the hope of the world. A great foreign leader whom I got to know late in his life told me that America is the only superpower whose power comes from giving, not from taking. In a functioning democracy, those ideals would have purchase in our policy and in our politics, but they don't today. As a candidate, the president spoke one truth when he said that conventional or establishment politics wasn't working well enough for most people. Senator Sanders spoke a similar truth. So did President Obama as he was leaving office. We all know it. That's precisely why we all have to engage and start holding our elected officials truly to account. But just as the nation is awakening to this realization again, some are also realizing for the first time that there has been another agenda right alongside to make it harder to engage. That's what gerrymandered districts are about, where the representatives choose the voters rather than the voters choosing the representatives. That's what vote suppression, that's what it's all about, such as voter ID laws and the purging of voter lists for those who don't vote, and bogus, accusations of vote fraud as a means to intimidate or inconvenience voters. We have the watering down of the Voting Rights Act on the absurd claim that discrimination is in decline in the face of evidence everywhere that discrimination is on the rise. We have the increasing influence of money in politics at all levels, soft, dark, hard, and unaccounted for, to the point where House and Senate members spend more time raising campaign money than they do doing the jobs we sent them there to do. And add to that the bitter irony that the Supreme Court this last term undermined the ability of labor to support the political interests of working people, yet just a few terms ago endorsed the ability of corporations to spend without limits to support the political interests of business, and you begin to see why so many have become so cynical about politics today. Just think about it. Just think about it. Polls show, for example, that Americans overwhelmingly favor universal access to affordable care, subsidized where necessary by government, overwhelmingly favor having women and their families, not government, choose whether to keep an unwanted pregnancy, overwhelmingly favor policies that address climate change and move us to a clean energy future, overwhelmingly favor reasonable limits on gun ownership, overwhelmingly favor limits on excessive spending in politics, and overwhelmingly favor full and prompt public disclosure as a hedge against corruption and conflicts of interest in our elected officials. And yet, none of these reforms move in Congress because bit by bit, our democracy has been engineered to assure that a powerful political minority and their lobbyists drive their agenda instead of ours. A friend of mine says that we've been treating our democracy for a long time like it would tolerate limitless abuse without breaking. And although this agenda to delegitimize democratic institutions has been driven by hard-right Republicans, I want to place the emphasis again on we. We. In a democracy, it's up to us to decide when a problem we observe is an issue worth solving. It's up to us to hold our elected officials accountable and to make sure they know they will be held accountable. It's up to us to get over feeling overwhelmed and get involved. It's up to us to go get the democracy we deserve, to vote in the democracy we deserve. It's up to us to act like patriots. I think patriotism demands more of us, more from all Americans than flag waving. I think it demands more from us than being a better Democrat or a better Republican. In America, it demands conscience. It demands sacrifice and generosity. It demands grace. It demands respect for the values of freedom, equality, opportunity, and fair play, even when it's inconvenient, even when it gets in the way of politics, even when it compels us to be mindful of and compassionate towards the lowly, the vulnerable, the different, and the despised. And it makes those demands on all Americans, from the meek to the mighty, whether we occupy elective office or the higher role of citizen. And patriotism demands today that we act, because the democracy is at risk, brothers and sisters. It's at risk. And we need to vote an agenda to revive it. We need a democracy agenda. To start with, we need to make it easier to vote. with same-day or automatic registration, online voting, or voting by mail, voting holidays, and other reforms to bring our system into the 21st century and encourage people to participate. And we need to repeal every effort in every state and in Congress to suppress the vote, whether that's by purging lists of registered voters, overly burdensome ID requirements, or limiting the hours and places to vote. Some of these practices are insidious. Florida, oh my goodness. Florida permanently denies the vote to felons even after they've served their time. Combine that with one of the highest incarceration rates in the country, and you have 1 out of every 10 Floridians, 1 out of 5 black men in Florida, permanently denied the right to vote. That law needs to go. General Holder was here a year or two ago. He said it, you know it. We need to end hyper-gerrymandered voting districts, especially in places that give undue voting power to a political minority. The Supreme Court seems to feel that practice can only be undone by politics, which, you know, that's about as artful a dodge as they get. So let's undo it politically. We need to require that all political contributions from any source to any recipient, whether a candidate, a PAC, or some other entity, be fully, promptly, and publicly disclosed, and that reasonable limits on campaign donations and spending be imposed on all candidates and on all campaigns. In that same spirit, we need safeguards to assure the integrity of the vote against tampering and undue influence, whether domestic or foreign. And we need to be prepared to vote out any incumbent and vote against any candidate from any party who resists these reforms. That's just the start. A democracy agenda in this country ought simply to enshrine in law norms we've taken for granted for too long, from establishing better guardrails against conflicts of interest to constraining abuses of power to protecting the independence of courts and freedom of the press. In a democracy, we get the government we deserve. So let's together give America a better democracy and vote a democracy agenda. Today, that's what patriots must do. Now, I know this is an ambitious agenda, especially for those who are feeling overwhelmed by the relentless negativity around us and the constant assault on American values. But I say an ambitious agenda is the only agenda worth having, and frankly, the only kind equal to the moment. And don't despair, I don't. Someone asked me at an event last year why I stay optimistic, and it occurred to me that I really don't know how to be pessimistic. Pessimism is not for me, not without breaking faith with the generations of slaves and strivers who held on and kept the faith to make a way for me. I owe something. I owe something. To my kids and grandson, to yours, to all the boys and girls of every race and background here and around the world whom I will never know, who still need America to be the hope of the world for freedom, equality, opportunity, and fair play. So does every patriot. So do you. America needs every patriot to believe that the day has not come when we have to agree on everything before we can work together on anything. And America needs every patriot to believe that we are not outnumbered. The bullies who run things today may be louder. They may from time to time be better organized or better financed, just by the way, like the British in 1776. But that doesn't make them right. And there are signs there are more of us than you may think. Three years ago, in my last year in office, America faced a crisis a lot like today's when unaccompanied children, some as young as 3 and 4 years old, were flooding across our southern border, having fled over thousands of miles from violence in Central America. And just like now, the federal authorities were overwhelmed. So President Obama, at that time, asked a number of states temporarily to shelter and care for some of the refugee children until they could be processed under our laws. Now, feelings around immigration ran hot even then. I got that. Nevertheless, I agreed that our state would help, because accepting the challenge to temporarily shelter poor children fleeing unspeakable violence seemed to me an act of both patriotism and faith. America has given sanctuary to desperate children for centuries. We've rescued Irish children from famine, Russian and Ukrainian children from religious persecution, Cambodian children from genocide, Haitian children from earthquakes, Sudanese children from civil war, and New Orleans children from Hurricane Katrina. Once, in 1939, we turned our backs on Jewish children fleeing the Nazis, and it remains a blight on our national reputation, as I fear, frankly, the separation of children from our parents on our border today will forever be remembered. The point is that this good nation is great when we open our doors and our hearts to needy children, and diminished when we don't. My decision was an act of faith, too. I believe one day we will have to answer for our actions and our inactions. Jews and Christians are taught that if a stranger dwells with you in your land, you shall not mistreat him, but rather love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. In my faith tradition, we are admonished to take in the stranger, for inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, Christ tells us, you did it to me. Every major faith tradition on earth charges its followers to treat others as we ourselves would wish to be treated. And still, I knew our offer of shelter would be controversial. Indeed, for that decision on hate radio and social media, I was called everything but a child of God. A couple of days later, on an unusually quiet Saturday morning, my wife Diane gave me a list of things to go get at the Home Depot. It was early in the day, and I thought I would just run out quickly on my own without bothering the state troopers in my security detail. They didn't like it when I did that, but I knew exactly where I was going and where to find everything on my list. So I set off in the truck, dressed in a t-shirt, jeans, and flip-flops, a baseball cap, and dark glasses. It didn't matter. I was outed by the manager in the very first aisle. "Governor Patrick," he said, "welcome to Home Depot. How can I help you?" I encountered a man in the checkout lane who was angry, not hostile or threatening, just angry and really loud. "Governor," he said, "I couldn't disagree with you more. Your offer to shelter these children, that is wrong." He said, "My own wife is an immigrant. She came here legally, and that's the way it ought to be. I just want you to know I think your decision is wrong." I thanked him for his feedback. I want you to know it was clear to everybody else in the lane and in the vicinity who was mad at whom and what he was mad about. I had 6 other encounters in the store that day on the same subject. In each of the others, someone came up and whispered, "Governor, I'm with you. Governor, you're doing the right thing. Governor, thanks for looking out for those kids." The calls to the office were 2 and 3 to 1 in favor of sheltering those kids. It struck me how we've come to whisper kindness and shout our anger. I don't know if that comes from the reality TV culture we live in or not, but I do know it's upside down. It's time we learn to shout kindness, to shout justice, to shout compassion. Blessedly, we're starting to see more and more of that across the country. From women who are demanding to be treated with the respect and decency we all deserve. From black and brown people who are demanding consistent professionalism and the presumption of innocence from police. From students who are demanding we choose their lives and safety over the proliferation of military weapons in civilian hands. From all those lawyers who showed up in airports after the Muslim ban, who demanded respect for the law, even for people some despise. Black Lives Matter, time's up. Black Girl Magic, Occupy Wall Street, families belong together. Some may see in these and similar actions disparate folks standing against different wrongs. But in a larger sense, all of them, all of us, are part of what Dr. King called a coalition of conscience. What we might call patriots fighting again for freedom, equality, opportunity, and fair play, regaining, all of us, our moral voice to resist injustice and shout kindness. Scripture says, let light shine out of darkness. The reason America is the world's best hope is because America, at her generous best, mindful of those civic ideals and striving never to settle, but to perfect our union, is the light shining out of the world's darkness. That is our civic faith. And as we strive to keep that faith, let us learn anew as citizens to shout kindness, and as patriots to vote our civic ideals, so that all of us and American democracy itself has a fighting chance. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Governor Patrick. Certainly given us something to think about. All right, I want to make a few acknowledgments. I see that our President and CEO has come in. Let's please acknowledge him. This morning, the Ming Award, which is the highest award that the NAACP gives to a lawyer, was awarded at the plenary session to Mr. Willie Gary. And Mr. Willie Gary's in the room. Please stand, Mr. Gary, to be acknowledged. I think I'm going to steal some of those stories you told this morning. All right. We have a few awards to present, so please bear with us. Today I have the honor to present the Juanita Jackson Mitchell Award to two deserving state conferences. Each year, the NAACP Office of General Counsel awards the Juanita Jackson Mitchell Legal Activism Award to an NAACP unit or units for exemplary legal redress committee activities. The award is named after the pioneering educator, activist, and first African-American woman to be licensed to practice law in the state of Maryland, Juanita Jackson Mitchell. Among her many accomplishments, Ms. Jackson Mitchell was the Baltimore branch president, the founder of the NAACP Youth and College Division, and an accomplished litigator. The units that will receive this award today for upholding her legacy of civil rights and legal advocacy. The first unit to receive the award is the Indiana State Conference, led by attorney Barbara Bowling Williams. I'd like to tell you a little bit about what the Indiana State Conference has been doing. The Indiana State Conference has vigorously pursued justice in the voting rights and environmental sectors. Recently, the State Conference sued to prevent Chris Kobach's cross-check system from being used to purge voters from the rolls in Indiana because of its unreliability and because it disproportionately affects African American and Latino voters. Litigation resulted in the issuance of a preliminary injunction that will prevent cross-check from being used in Indiana during this election cycle. Additionally, the Indiana State Conference has been steadfast in its efforts to secure environmental justice. The State Conference has advocated vigorously to public utility commissions and administrative law judges to protect African American and low-income residents from changes that would degrade the air and water quality in their communities. In addition, the Indiana State Conference has brought suit all right, it's here somewhere. Has brought suit to prevent the state of Indiana from imposing unnecessary and unlawful work requirements on Medicaid recipients. For these and several other reasons, is the hardware somewhere? Okay. For these and several other reasons, we are proud to present the Juanita Jackson Mitchell Award for Legal Activism to the Indiana State Conference, and receiving the award on behalf of the State Conference is its president, Barbara Bowling Williams.
I was told we only had 2 minutes, and I guess Brad decided that if he tells about the lawsuits and the cases we've been involved with in Indiana, that'll cut down my time significantly, and he was right. But I do want to just lift up, and I had already decided I wanted to lift up one that I'm extremely proud of, and that is a lawsuit that expanded early voting options for the city of Indianapolis, the capital of our state, in Marion County. For the last 8 years, Marion County has not had any early voting sites except for one. There are approximately 700,000 voters in our capital city and county. They only had one. In the city where I was born and raised and continue to reside, of Gary, we have approximately 200,000 voters, and we had 14 early voting sites. So that was one of our lawsuits, was to expand the opportunities for the city with the largest African American population in our state to be able to have more than one early voting site. And as a result of that lawsuit, they now will have 4. So at this time, I'm going to ask the members of the Indiana State Conference who are here to stand so that you can see who they are, all Indiana State Conference members. And on behalf of them, we want to thank you, Brad, for your support, because as you know, we cannot engage in any type of litigation without the permission of our General Counsel and President CEO. So we could not do the work of the NAACP without the support of our national office. And so we thank him today. And absolutely. And we thank his staff because they help us and oversee the litigation that we're engaged in. And we also want to thank partners such as the Brennan Center for Justice, Perkins Cole, and other attorneys who volunteer their time because they have a belief in justice. They have a heart for progress, and they are patriots. So on behalf of the Indiana State Conference, we humbly accept this award for doing something and being recognized for something that we had a heart and a patriotism system to want to do. Thank you.
The next awardee is the Alabama State Conference, led by Mr. Bernard Simonson. We're all aware of the NAACP's long and storied history of legal advocacy in the state of Alabama. This state conference is continuing its strong legacy of fighting for our rights in court, none less important than the right to vote. 5 years ago, as the country was reeling from the highly disappointing decision in Shelby County versus Holder, and Shelby County is in Alabama, by the way, the Alabama State Conference went right back to work. When the state attempted to shut down 34 DMV locations, mostly in the black belt section of the state, and as you know, people can register to vote in DMV locations, the state conference sued the state and compelled the U.S. Department of Transportation to step in and investigate. In 2016, the state conference brought suit to challenge the at-large system for electing judges to the state's appellate courts, a system that has long prevented African American judges from being elected to serve on those courts. That lawsuit is pending. When Senator Jeff Sessions was nominated to serve as Attorney General of the United States, the state conference organized protests and sit-ins that brought national attention to his poor record on civil rights, and on voting rights in particular, and his unfitness to serve in that capacity. And the state conference continues in its challenge to the state of Alabama's photo identification requirement for voting, a law which, as we all know, disproportionately impacts Latin American, African American, and Latino voters in that state. Through ups and downs, the Alabama State Conference has remained vigilant in its pursuit of justice. We are therefore proud to present to the Alabama State Conference the Juanita Jackson Mitchell Award for Legal Activism, and accepting the award on behalf of the State Conference is Mr. Bernard Simonson.
Good afternoon, NAC peers. We want to thank our messenger, Mr. Patrick. Thank you for a wonderful message and the challenge that you have issued to us. We also want to thank the legal counsel for the NAACP, Mr. Brad Berry, in his office. We thank him for recognizing the work of the Alabama NAACP. But more importantly, I want to thank the hardworking people in the Alabama State Conference of the NAACP. So I want all the Alabama NAACPers to stand at this time to be recognized. These are the people that you can find on any day, any night, fighting for equality and justice in the state of Alabama. It doesn't matter if it's in Huntsville, Alabama, or Mobile, they are on the case. And I want to recognize our legal redress chair, Ms. Carolyn Shields. Wave your hand, Carolyn, who does an excellent job in reviewing our cases. Now, you can imagine living in Alabama, you know, there is no lack of work when it comes to voting rights or any legal issue. But we do a lot of work in trying to level the playing field. So to these interns, when you finish your law school and you want to practice some real civil rights law, come on down to Alabama. We'll welcome you down there, and we'll put you to work immediately. You know, in January of last year, I got a call from then President Brooks, and it was one of the calls that I think I had spoken to him maybe once or twice before, but it was sounded like a different call. And he said, Bernard, how do you feel about being arrested? I said, well, I've never been arrested, so I don't really have a feeling. So I know it's something that I'm not looking forward to. And he went on to tell me that what his idea was to counter Sessions' appointment to the Attorney General. And after he and I talked for a few minutes, I said, I think that's a good idea. And I talked to my wife about it, and she wasn't too hot on the idea at the time, but I think she later on came over and agreed with us that it was time to protest the inequities, not only of what Sessions would do, but what he had done in the past. And so we went down to Mobile, and 7 of us were arrested. But we were not only arrested once, we were arrested twice. And the news people says, well, do you think you made any difference? And I said, well, you know, I would have rather been arrested and him get elected than me sit on my rear end and him still get elected. So we protested, and we continued to protest his nomination and, of course, his appointment to the position of Attorney General. And I think you can see that what he's doing and what the person that sits in the White House is doing, how they are rolling back all the gains that we have made in our civil rights efforts throughout the years. They're rolling them back, and we've got to continue this fight. And my question to you, NAACP, is, are you ready for a fight? Are you ready for a fight? Come on down to Alabama.
Right. We're getting there. We're getting there, folks. Each year, the NAACP Legal Department honors attorneys who have gone above and beyond the call of duty on behalf of the association and its civil rights work. This year, we honor the law firm of Cohen, Milstein, Sellers, and Toll for its tireless work on behalf of the NAACP. Where is Joe? Oh, okay. You might want to start making your way up, Joe. Cohen Milstein is an example of how a law firm founded on the principles of equity and social justice can make a direct and positive impact on communities across the country. Cohen Milstein is one of the leading plaintiff-side class action law firms in the country. Under the direction of its managing partner, my old friend Joseph Sellers, the firm has brought lawsuits all over the country challenging civil rights violations by large employers. When the NAACP Board of Directors resolved in 2016 that the association should explore litigation options with respect to the Flint, Michigan water crisis, we didn't have to think very long about which firm to ask for help. We're now participating in class action lawsuits and in federal and state court in Michigan, and ours was the first of the many cases filed to name as defendants the engineering firms who advised the state officials who ordered the disastrous switch in the source of the city of Flint's water supply. Moreover, when the NAACP was exploring options with respect to challenging the Trump administration's termination of the DACA program, Joe Sellers stepped up to the plate right away and offered the firm's assistance. Our lawsuit produced the first opinion in which any court has declared unlawful the administration's termination of the DACA program, and we are continuing that fight in federal court in D.C., represented by Cohen Milstein. Cohen Milstein has advised the association on any number of matters, large and small, over the past few years. His advice has always been invaluable, and his professionalism flawless. It is therefore my honor to present to the law firm of Cohen, Milstein, Sellers, and Toll the 2018 Foot Soldier in the Sand Award. Accepting the award on behalf of Cohen Milstein is none other than Joe Sellers.
Thank you. I know the hour is late, and I will be brief. Two comments. First, it's been an enormous honor to work side by side with the outstanding lawyers at the NAACP, and I'd like you to join me in giving them a round of applause. Second, I'd like to take a page from Governor Patrick's book about what it means to be a patriot. One of the things that it means to be a patriot, I think, is honoring the laws that have been, the way they've been enacted by Congress and the Constitution as it was ratified. And we as lawyers are dedicated to doing that and to standing with the NAACP tirelessly to ensure it continues to happen, notwithstanding the fact that we have a government, federal government at least, that I regret to say is not our friend right now. But we're here to stay, and we're here to win. Thank you.
I think, well, we have one more. We don't allow